I get a 70. Is that 451? Yeah. Okay. That I see on that. Yeah, I showed up to that class one day last semester and I didn't show. Well, I've heard like 451 like a book club. Like you just read and then what are we gonna think about? That's why I was going to get to that. Integrated investment management. But I was like. Yeah, I switched to certificate after class. Yeah, Chris showed up one day and we said, we're never showing up. It's not fun. Yeah, the video quiz. My wall. Like I know you gave it to me. I'm like, I just turned it. I don't use any of my professional.
I would make it.
Shame, you're right on Michigan Avenue, New York. Explore. What college?
National Association of Student Personnel Administrators.
A lot of levels.
There are, it's like.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yes,
appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Well, I hope you had a good time.
Hey. I'm doing well. How are you?
Campus.
Sure. Yeah. No worries. No problem at all. Heads up.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to our third meeting of the Tuition and Fee Strategies Committee. Obviously, last meeting we had Dino Keefe here presenting on the fee, so now is sort of just a more casual question and answer portion where if any of you have questions for Dino Keefe about anything that he gave talked about in his presentation, anything related to the fee, anything like that, we can get some clarification if there are any questions. So
can we pull up the presentation?
yeah, I have it pulled up here so we can just look at it in case anyone wants to see. Oh geez. Zoom thing is always so tricky. There we go. Yeah, so if anyone wanted me to navigate to a specific slide they remembered having questions on or anything like that, I can do that.
It was way last week, so.
Yeah, I gotta
I'm
take a second
remembering when I presented, so.
Gotta get the
I like
wheels.
my lecture.
Long weekend.
Did I say that out?
That's okay. I didn't hear anything.
Okay, so my little story there that I'll tell, this is my mentor. He's a wonderful person. He's 100 years old. He's still around, faculty
Wow.
member. He forgot he was giving a test one day. This was long ago, like the 1960s. And he walked in and he made up the test on the chalkboard as they sat there. Is that not on the spot?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Wow.
He forgot that they.
That is a definitely.
Yeah, he is.
You gotta know the content, really.
He's an amazing person. Yeah, he's really sharp, but a little bit scatterbrained.
So as we look at the specific fees here, first talking about the faculty salary surcharge. The $105.60 per student credit hour. I guess just to refresh our memories and for those who weren't able to be here, that was primarily intended to be a surcharge added to help College of Engineering faculty be compensated at a more competitive level. And how, I guess, could you give just a little bit of the history? I guess it started in '92 and was raised in 2009.
So the one in '92 actually was the technology fee, the equipment fee.
Oh, sure. I see
And
that.
that's what started originally is really equipment in the lab and has evolved into really basically
Second
all
slide.
IT. Right, so it's IT services as well as equipment that we're always constantly. I think it's FY. It's in the
Second slide there.
I think 03 or something, 02, 03 was when the compensation part came in. So right?
Yeah.
So,
there.
yeah, 03 for salary increases. And that started at that time and it's built up to where it
And
is.
has that been primarily to expand the amount of faculty, and just the need for that based upon, you know, the level, of funding that your college receives, or is it per, per professor in the College of Engineering per se, they just need to be compensated at a higher level?
Both. So it has been used to hire more professors over time. And it's also been used to try to increase their compensation, which, and I didn't bring it, is still below the average.
It is.
Which is not in the presentation. But- So we're still trying to catch up, which is probably true of the entire campus.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pretty much.
And Ethan, is this, maybe you can help kind of contextualize this specific fee a little bit? Are there comparable fees across other colleges that look at specifically faculty and their compensation? Because I know the institution as a whole were like 15% below, our professors and faculty are compensated like 15% below what's expected in the
On
marketplace.
average, yeah, in comparison to our peer comparisons, we're about 15% below for tenure track faculty. The College of Business also has a faculty surcharge as well that they had in place about the same time as College of Engineering, also kind of looking at for salaries and potentially some staffing. I'm not quite sure if they did add that or not. Other college fees have been more geared to programmatic specific, not necessarily kind of college wide. And College of Education actually doesn't even have one. So it's kind of grown as a college has considered taking on or growing additional programs or offering new programs in order to provide that support to sort of stand them up and then operate them as well. So it's kind of grown, just kind of depends. Broadly for the university, I know President Linton is interested in crafting a plan, multi-year plan about how do we start addressing faculty and staff salaries, which, you know, again, from both sides of the house, we're under our peer comparisons.
Who are our peers?
There's a list of 2025 peers
Okay.
that were agreed upon when the 2025 strategic plan was published, and that's who we compare ourselves against. And don't ask me to name them all, but Auburn's on there. We just looked at this list yesterday.
Washington State, Oklahoma State.
A lot of other land grants.
Other land
Research
grants.
heavy.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, there was
Typically not a medical school. or
Right.
law school.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was sort of that characterization.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've always wondered that.
So what, I guess, what does it maybe look like as those conversations start to be had about strategically, institution-wide, how we you know, sort of combat, I guess, that challenge of having or that challenge of fairly and equitably.
Comes to revenue. That's
Okay.
that's the bottom line equation of how we start to address those
And
things.
so what piece does a current fee like this fit into that? And what is the relevance of this like specific fee in the College of Engineering per se? Why wouldn't the College of Agriculture put in a fee like that? Or is that just going to be the sort of recommendation that comes from administration as well? Probably that's gonna be the best way to address it. rather than
No,
being
I don't know
pretty
that broadly, I don't think that would be the plan, is start implementing different fees. I think broadly it's how do we grow our enrollment? How do we look at growing our tuition revenue? How do we talk about that with the state for additional state funding to start addressing that? So, I mean, for us to be able to improve our compensation, we've got to grow our revenue streams to do so. I think and again, these College of Engineering, College of Business specifically, they had the history behind that is at the time, even though we were growing as an institution, the need to be able to augment or grow additional staff within the colleges was sort of that impetus for having these additional fees put into place at that time. And that's just what's continued throughout the effort. We had our UEIA, our Engineering Initiative Act, which was again another focus area for for K-State to grow and produce more engineering graduates at the time.
Maybe also there's something to consider for engineering. It's more expensive
Yeah.
to educate an engineering student. It's a lot more expensive.
Sure.
And so back to comparators, go look at each of those comparators and you will see almost everyone, including KU, which isn't necessarily a comparator, but everybody has an engineering fee.
Yeah.
Because there's a recognition it's a differential tuition. And I'll just say, just for reference, just to make you feel better, it's twice that at my alma mater. It's $235 an hour at Missouri S&T for engineering. And they charge one for business and they charge, I mean, so that's just a recognition of what it takes.
Sure.
I had another question. So in FY 21 and 22, on the breakdown that Ethan's office provided, you had a deficit of $1 million and some change in 21 and over 300,000 in 22. How did you cover the deficit spending?
Other sources.
Okay.
Revenue, yeah. And so look at it from our standpoint, right? We get it from, and as I showed you, right, we have philanthropy actually is probably the biggest part of that. And then as Ethan mentioned, University Engineering Initiative Act, we have some discretion on how we spend, which is good. But then what are we doing? The other side is we didn't cut back our services, right? So it's important to keep going with what we have and then find that from elsewhere. And that's what we're doing on a
Yeah.
daily basis
Yeah.
of trying to figure out what do we keep and how do we cover that?
Yeah, Jack, go ahead.
I do have a question about, revenue sources and, stuff like that. I was just wondering, do you guys rent out Beocat whenever it's on use or?
So Beocat is a separate line. It goes on the research side and it's highly subsidized. And it does have user fees to it, but they're very minimal to make it very, very affordable to others. And that's actually something that we have to look at.
For the humanities
Beocat.
majors in the room,
Yeah,
what is Beocat?
Beocat's the supercomputing, high performance computing.
Okay.
With all the servers and a really, what needs to be even better, air conditioning.
We're working on it.
We're working on it.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's also the home to our, what's left of our on-premise data center.
Yeah.
So when the
What
library
happened in
fire,
there?
took place, we moved a lot into the cloud, but there's still some components that are on-prem and we've moved it into the Beocat to leverage that
Yeah.
facility.
Yeah, Marcus, I think you had one.
Yeah, so I was not here last week, so I apologize if I asked a question that was already covered in the presentation. I guess my initial question is, what do the fees look like for the other schools in Kansas that offer engineering programs? I saw a graph of our enrollments for engineering related to other schools, I think in Kansas. Maybe, yes, so
That's degrees granted. I think
Yes.
this one is.
Yeah, so I don't have anything about what their fees are,
Okay.
but we could certainly look up. I know KU's is pretty similar in engineering, and you gotta go to make sure you get the engineering one as opposed to others. So it's approximately $100 at KU. I don't know about Wichita State.
Wichita looks like it's 89.
Okay,
thank you.
yep,
Ethan, maybe I think it could be helpful to provide some context how revenue is distributed back to individual colleges. So we understand, why is it necessary for, maybe it's more expensive to educate an engineering student, but why don't they receive more funding? Or like, I guess, what is that sort of general process kind of oversight? What does that look like?
So that's, we're under what's called a high responsibility center model, so budget model. And so what we look at is the amount of revenue that we generate as an institution, we disperse it back. And this, we can spend all day talking about it. And then you'd all be asleep at the end of it. What we look at is we look at dispersing that back out on a percentage basis of what was your production of credit hours or majors, both undergrad and grad. And there's different formulas that we use to push those dollars out. So it's on the basis of production, right? And everybody pays that general base tuition, right? Your base tuition rate, either in-state or out-of-state, or some variation depending on if you have some other type of tuition break from out of state. And so it gets pooled together and then we push that back out. That's, I think, in essence, what Dean O'Keefe is sort of alluding to, is that additional fee that is paid directly by by the students taking engineering courses goes directly back to the college to support that activity. And that's what's in a lot of other institutions, they call that sort of a differential tuition that would be paid when you're taking those courses. We just call it a fee.
Yep.
So we have a general base methodology for dispersing tuition, and then the fee piece goes directly back to the college.
Perfect. I think that helped. Is that kind of, is everybody kind of tracking that?
Jeremy, did you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I'm circling back to BayoCat. I use supercomputers for my research. I'm just a little interested in, you mentioned that you'd be looking at the college would be looking at the user fees for BayoCat. I was wondering if you'd be able to elaborate a little bit on that or.
So it's a shared resource. So basically you can put a server or something in there and then we kind of take care of it. Well, campus takes care of it, really. It's well, we all do, right? I mean, we all share the expense, right? And then depending on where you're at, it depends on how much we would charge or not charge. But we need to look at it because quite truthfully, it's a cost deficit.
That was my follow-up question. So I know how much energy that thing takes.
It is. And so we need to look at a way, and the challenge is how do we continue to provide it so people can use it in a way we can continue to take care of it.
Mhm.
And we're looking at that very, very strongly right now. And we're doing the same thing, which is go look how other people do it, try to find a model that we think works for everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Continuing the sidebar on BayoCat, we are going to invest about 3 million into the facility using some of the state's deferred maintenance dollars that we received this year. And some university resources and college resources as well, to try to really bring that facility up to proper standards for HVAC and conditioning of the space. Because we had an incident earlier this summer where a water line broke and it reduced chilled water line, and the BayoCat overheated in a couple instances. So we're trying to fix that.
Marcus, go ahead.
Yeah, so looking at, I'm just interested in what the College of Engineering has done in relation to market research and looking at like the price point for that fee and just like what research has been done to assess, is this like overburdening our students, that extra fee, or our majority of engineering students that you're seeing not even that phased by it, or has there been any research on that end?
We constantly look at what others are doing and knowing where it is. So that's why I know a couple of comparators, which is really from our standpoint, from an undergraduate standpoint, who are we competing with for students, right? So it's a handful. So we're aware of doing that. And again, you have to be aware of what's your net cost of actually going to college, right? Because some will, as you'll say, some will roll it into tuition and just say it's a higher tuition you pay, right? And then others will say, and you have to be careful when you go on the website, they'll say, well, here's what you pay. Oh, but if you take these classes, we'll add on this. Well, you better add that on to know what you're really paying. And so we actually did a lot of that last year, trying to figure out how to come up with where these are situated. So actually, we're pretty comfortable that we're competitive with, I think, all of these right now.
Another question. So in your presentation, you mentioned how there is not been an increase in tenure faculty and you're kind of staying level at the same level.
Mhm.
By keeping this tenure faculty level, how does that affecting your undergraduate research opportunities by focusing on more instructors rather than those tenure professors?
Yeah, in part, that's to try to free up the tenured professors. The non-tenure track, which we've increased, take a larger teaching load, right? So they teach more classes in larger classes.
Mhm.
So in terms of what the teaching load is for our tenured, it's about the same. And we recognize we have to keep them. A lot of their time has to be available for research and writing grants and proposals and all of that. So it's absolutely factored into that.
And then on the topic of those grants, how much money do those tenure faculty typically bring in terms of their grants?
Last year was $33 million in awards.
Okay, thank
For
you.
the College of
They're
Engineering.
paying for themselves.
Well, there's overhead, there's a lot of things
Yeah.
that go into that, but it's been running between 25 to 30 for the last few years. So yeah, but it's also part of our mission is that if there's graduate students, right? And then just so you're aware, in engineering, we pay our graduate students. They're really employees. I mean, at that point, we go out and find money, that external money, that 33 million, and then we hire them to be graduate students. We pay them to do that from those sources. And that's also, if you go through the 17.7 million, that's the pass through, right? Where remember on our budget as we were going through with that, that's basically money that comes in and goes out. So if you go down another couple on the revenue side, right? Extramural, we guesstimate how much we're actually going to spend at any given year. So it's about 20 million. But then if you go, that's the revenue. So if you go to the next one, if you look on the lower right, extramural, it comes in and goes out. Right? But then there are other things, overhead and aspects that how you get to the higher number, which is what helps pick a lot of things.
Any more questions, anybody?
Yeah, I have one. So I know last time I was a freshman and saw the College of Engineering fee review 3 years ago. And I know at that point in time, the UEIA funding was, I guess, kind of up in the air if it was going to be continued. So I knowing that it has been continued, what is, I guess, the current state or future outlook of that funding?
Okay, so it's kept at the same level that it was, so there wasn't an increase. It has had additional objectives or goals put to it. Before it was to increase the number of students that are graduating. And they kept that number the same, but now they've asked us to work more with Kansas companies and industry. So we have to put some of our resources toward working with Kansas companies and quite truthfully, what they really want more students to stay in the state. And that's a big aspect. Timing wise, just so you're aware, there's an election in 3 weeks. And we don't have any more direction because they're out campaigning. And we're waiting to see which governor and lieutenant governor we're going to have to work with, whether it's the current ones or if that's changing in January. So we're kind of waiting to answer your question. We're kind of waiting for what it is they want to do. And I think that's true on a lot
of things.
on a lot of things, right? It's a few weeks.
Mhm.
We've already had discussions, but nothing's been decided.
Gotcha.
So we're kind of waiting. And it just started July 1, so we haven't.
Is that something that's normally like year over year determined, or is it?
No, it's much more like, it's much more, we're talking right now, since it just got renewed and it's a 10-year, we're talking about by the end of 2031.
Gotcha.
Where do we want to be? It's those kind of goals.
Okay, that makes sense.
Right, so in engineering, it's more like 4.5 years to graduate. So next year, the freshmen are going to graduate in 5 years from now. So we're really talking about the next couple of years when they're going to graduate. We'll be at 10 years before we know it.
That's weird to think of. 2038
That's
or
the-
28.
Yeah, but that's the way that we have to, like, incoming freshmen, when are they really going to be graduating and going into the workforce, which is like the legislatures, which is, you know, their aspect, how do they increase prosperity?
Thank you.
Any further questions from anybody? Let's see if there's anything in the Zoom.
I have a question, just out of curiosity. I guess the intent of this right now is just reviewing the current fees and looking at where we're at and how those are being utilized. But looking at the previous 2 fiscal years and having to take out deficit spending in both fiscal years 21 and 22, do you anticipate a need down the road, should all else ceteris paribus, potentially increasing those fees? And where is that need do you see most? Is that going to come on the surcharge fee or potentially in IT? Or do you see other potential sources of revenue that will help cover that deficit in the future?
Yeah, I think it's really back to the same thing with Kansas. It's enrollment growth. Right? As we grow, and now with the new budget model, as we grow, also we know when we have an incoming freshman class, we can project it, how long they're going to be here, how much revenue we're going to get off, generate from them, how many are going to graduate. Now we can begin to budget for that. So wouldn't necessarily anticipate coming back to that. The only thing that as we deal with, if the state were to cut how much support we get, right? So we have a fixed cost, right? We look at the number of faculty, look at the number of staff, look at how we can do it. Can we take the number of staff and faculty we have, add students and take these into positive numbers with the given fees? Yes. Right? But if the state cuts us, that's a part of our revenue. And then we have to come back to all of you and say, okay, we gotta make this up somehow.
Fair enough. Yeah, Marcus, go ahead.
And again, I apologize if this was already mentioned last week. So of the fee that's charged to students, like the 105.60 or whatever the amount. So does any part of that go towards like your recruitment operations? Did you already say that? Or
No.
Okay, so just a faculty.
Yep.
Really? Okay.
So I will say this, that it was mentioned, our recruitment is all philanthropic. It is paid for by the foundation, through the foundation. Which is probably not quite truthfully, it's quite not ideal. But that's how we make it up.
Sir, can you say that again? Your recruitment for
Our recruitment team are the people who work and do our recruitment
students or
for
faculty?
students, for students, for predominantly undergraduate students.
Gotcha.
But graduate students are pretty much recruited by their, by the faculty. We actually pay those out of philanthropic dollars, so foundation dollars. We have someone that gives us money that says, we just need to graduate more engineers. And that's a wonderful thing, because then it says, well, you can do a lot of things to help with engineers. But
And that's probably an anomaly.
that's a huge anomaly.
Huge anomaly.
We are unique in that.
Mhm.
I don't think anybody
An
else.
anomaly across colleges at
Across-
Kansas State or across
Both.
region institutions?
Both.
Probably both.
Oh,
So what, I guess, can you go to the slide that compares the undergraduate enrollment? So I guess, do you have some maybe thoughts or ideas as to like, I don't know, our recruitment, where that's at and what has maybe caused some of the, at one point in time in academic year 16 and 17, we had significantly higher undergraduate
Mhm.
enrollment in engineering. That gap is certainly closed. Although it hasn't necessarily quite as much for degrees granted, but some of that could just be because the degrees granted were from 4 years ago when those undergrad
right,
enrollments.
yeah, they work their way through.
Yeah, eventually they will
Eventually,
probably.
that's right, and they're starting to do
Matriculated enrollment.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I borrowed that from you, Ethan. I love saying that.
that. There you go. Yeah, it's multifaceted, right? There's a lot of things going on here. One is we brought up UEIA, Wichita State, KU, and K-State back in 2012. We all get the same amount of money. Okay, so if you look at the 2012 enrollment, from a budget standpoint, that's a much smaller amount for K-State than it was for especially Wichita State.
and now what was that funding exactly? Was that a special program?
Yeah, that's from the state. That's the UEIA that Blake can explain. It's additional money from the state, the KU, Wichita State, and K-State.
And that was like a Board of Regents initiative to increase the number of engineers in the state of Kansas?
Yeah, it's the
To some
legislature,
extent.
actually.
The legislature?
Right, to
Gotcha.
increase the number of engineers, and they gave the same amount to each one of those. I would say if you look at 2012, 2023, what you look at is if you keep putting the same amount of money into the same people, they're probably going to end up being pretty similar. So from Wichita State standpoint, that's a significant part of their budget.
And it's still that way.
And
that's the
it's
same
still
for
that way. Yes,
Interesting.
and if, yeah. That's a part of it. The other part is that, and Dean Clark mentioned it last time, 2017, it was implemented for selective admission, right? Putting in different admission standards, which is common for engineering, like in order to really be admitted. There were a lot of students probably in 2017 that wanted to be engineers, but probably didn't really have mostly math to be able to do that. So there was a higher or a lower graduation rate, we should say. And we're much better at that. Retention in 4 and 6 year have gone up a lot, which goes to the next one. So see, this is the one that I like to talk about with the legislature, which is we're much more efficient at getting students graduated, which is ultimately the goal. That's really the goal. And we do a much more efficient job here than elsewhere. Within the state.
Here's even deeper fundamental legislative question is, does a state with the size of population of Kansas really require 3 engineering colleges?
There would be that question as well, right? And if you look at others, there's reason to believe you'd be better off with less that are larger, and then economies of scale would kick in. Yeah.
So also prior to you, the college putting in your selective admissions, the university, KBOR actually came in with qualified admissions prior to that too. So you saw, I think you're seeing kind of a twofold impact to that declining enrollment figure. But it has led to increased retention and graduation rates as well, because we're enrolling students that are more prepared.
Go ahead, Chris.
Sorry, so I'm with the graduate school, so I'd be remiss if I didn't ask a graduate school related question. So that fee that's paid, is that only by undergraduate students, or do grad students pay that fee too?
It's all engineering.
Okay, so then my question is, you mentioned that a lot of your grad students are paid like their employees. Do you have like any sort of like data or metric that you can tell us for like around like how much are like their stipends or anything regarding? Like,
Yeah,
a sort
so-
of picture.
Right, so stipends of 50% FT, half-time, full-time equivalent is in the low 20,000. That's what they're paid. Now, on top of that, then becomes their tuition and fees, which we actually cover one way or another. We do, right? So we either take it out of ours, or better, an external grant, you can write it in there and have National Science Foundation. Here's how much it costs for a student. Here's how much your tuition and fees. And then Mr. Erickson's very happy because we have outside revenue that comes in and pays that, right? So absolutely, we do that. And that's actually, we use part of UEIA to do aspects of that, because some of those people do have a GTA and they're helping to teach the labs. So then we'll use part of the UEIA money to help cover that.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Do you use any of that money for GRAs?
We do not. So, and again, it's more for the way engineering is set up. Graduate research assistants will be ones that are typically almost always, not quite, but almost always funded by someone else, some outside, whether it's Federal National Science Foundation, or it could be John Deere, right? Somebody who's funding research will pay, and we'll call those a graduate research assistant. And then they won't have to teach a class, it'll be a TA.
I asked because I'm on a separate committee and we can fund GRAs. So if you guys were using those, you guys haven't applied for it.
Right, and so it's a little bit different model in engineering. But it's possible, yeah.
Does anyone have any final questions? Do you know, Keith, anything you'd like to add before we wrap up?
No, I appreciate the opportunity. It's a really good question. You're learning the things that we deal with on an ongoing basis, and learning how to say, well, what does that mean? And how does that go? How do you look at those graphs and data and try to, dissect it and understand it? So I think it's really great. It's good.
Well, we don't have anything else for today's meeting.
Okay.
So, Keith, you're more than welcome to stay, but if you have other places to be, you're more than welcome to head out also.
Sure. No problem. Thanks much.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you.
It's like clapping to have me leave.
Okay, so for everyone still in the room, we've technically got about an hour left in the scheduled meeting. So if we want to save ourselves some time next week, we could do a little bit of discussion and deliberation and reach a conclusion about the fee this week, or we could give it a week, sit on everything that we went over with Keith today, and meet next week and come to our conclusion next week. It's really up to what you guys want to do, if you want a free week or not.
And just for reminders, so what we're currently doing right now in reviewing this College of Engineering fee, we're not necessarily looking at the merits of that fee, I guess. We're more so just looking at, is it being assessed and implemented as it's intended and as it's supposed to be? So basically, is this faculty surcharge, is it doing what they've intended and what they've said it would do? And then same thing with the IT fee they have separately. Is that money going to where it kind of should be? And then I don't remember what exactly.
I'll throw this up on the screen.
Perfect.
Do you know, we had, Blake actually was kind enough to share the original presentation from the proposal that they gave Blake's freshman year about, well, that did not help at all. About what the fee was going to be used for. And these first two slides here are pretty helpful. So we have an engineering equipment fee of $19 per student credit hour is used to pay for IT equipment and associated technical support. Funds are shared with each academic unit based on the student credit hour production. This fee was initiated in FY92 and increased at the current level in FY09. So based on everything that Dean O'Keefe shared with us about how they spend the fee versus what it was proposed, they would spend the fee on. That is, or what they have said that they spend the fee on, sorry. That's what we're looking at. He shared all that information with us last week about where that money's going, what exactly the line items are on that. And this is what, as described, the fee was going to be spent on. So we're just looking at making sure that those two things line up. So if we think those two things line up, then we can approve the fee, not put it on probation, and just let it stand as it is. Our other option, if we don't think those two things are lining up, we can put the fee on probation, and that gives the College of Engineering about 1 fiscal year to turn it around and make sure that the fee is being spent appropriately. Like I said this at our first meeting. Yeah, so we put them on probation. We send a report to the president and the provost, and then they have to come back in a year, and we can recommend that we continue, reduce, or terminate the fee. Those are the two options. Looks like I said at our first meeting, like if Dean O'Keefe had come in and been like, well, I really needed a new car to get to campus, and like bought himself a car, that would not be an appropriate use of the fee, but we didn't see any evidence of that in the presentation that he gave.
We would have flagged that on the accounting.
I think you might have too. And then for the faculty surcharge, used for faculty salaries with to help with instructional support. And then that sort of gives a breakdown of when it was implemented and the increases that they had taken up to fiscal year 20 when this presentation was given. So like I said, if we want to save ourselves some time next week, we can do a little bit of deliberation and come to a conclusion. I'm seeing some shaking yes heads this week. So does anyone have anything they want to add? Any conversation about what they think the fee status should be, or do we have a motion on the floor?
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
So did he talk about this last week of like faculty staff retention? So like if the purpose of this is to help be more competitive, is it actually working? Like was there any data
So,
shared
I got
among?
some numbers. So this gives you an idea. There was a decrease in tenured track, increase in non-tenure, and roughly equivalent in tenure. Does that eliminate that for you, Marcus?
Some of that decrease between 21 and 22, the university actually had not supposed to call it this, but an early retirement program that we incentivized tenured and tenure track faculty. And so I know College of Engineering had some of those positions participate.
That's why it suddenly went up by 7 and then back down by 7.
Yeah, so I think that's what's causing some of that. And then either they elected not to fill them and they converted them to the non-tenure track instead. In order, again, everybody's just trying to balance their budgets as they go through each year as we are, dealing with enrollment losses.
So you'll see there at the bottom, Marcus, they're actually down 8 total faculty. From year to year.
And then this, I believe it was the faculty surcharge, the last time it was increased was actually 2009. So to like actually draw the line between we increased faculty when this fee was increased. But that's, I think he kind of helped outline it in some along the line of questioning as to like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah. What else? Other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns? Any or all of the above?
Or a motion.
What would a motion look like? What types of motions could we make?
You can move to approve the fee utilization or disapprove the fee utilization.
Motion to approve.
Oh,
I think, you can say, I can second you. I got you.
Well, we just need to know who said it for the minutes.
Motion to.
You move to approve the fee utilization? And you second?
Yes.
Okay. Jeff, can you take us through a roll call vote?
Yes, I can. Okay. President Voldemore,
I don't vote.
You don't?
do.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
I do vote.
Yeah.
Nice.
The one time
Yes.
Parker and I actually get to.
I vote yes, Jeffrey.
Porter,
I vote yes, Jeffrey.
Warren,
Yes.
Jeremy,
Yes.
Cameron,
Yes.
Carly,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Taylor.
Yes.
Soggy here?
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Nice.
Yes.
And then Marcus.
Yes.
Perfect. So that passes. How many people are here? It just passes unanimously.
He'll have the right number on the minutes. That's all. that matters.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Well, cool. I think some good things that were brought up out of this that potentially as we think of like the tuition and fee strategies part of this committee and what that potentially some of those conversations could look like maybe later in the semester, but also in the next semester is talking about institution-wide. What is that? What are some of the biggest challenges like our faculty compensation? What are the strategies that are going to be discussed as to how, we can change that? And then we even kind of got into the idea of differential tuition and what that looks like and how that would be adjusted in relation to our current budget model. So those could be some interesting conversations to take a further dive into for those who might be interested. But
I think too, the university is going through strategic planning as well. And I think that process is going to also help inform us in some of these areas. Compensation obviously is going to be one key theme of that. And how do we develop kind of a multi-year plan to start addressing faculty and staff salaries? But then I think you're right, it's diving down then is how could we potentially restructure our tuition and fees in the future, getting to differential tuition. We took a big step in that this last year or fall 21, kind of really consolidating and eliminating a lot of our fees to make it much more streamlined. Because I can tell you prior to this, the bill was just unmanageable and nobody could understand it. And so we took a big leap, and I think there's more work that we could be doing at the institution to make it even more understandable.
absolutely. And just to add to that, we got to go spend the last weekend at the Big 12 Student Governing Association Conference. And the big thing on our minds that we talk about is our student government is we're a governance body. A lot of our responsibility lies within overseeing fees and all that sort of thing. A lot of student governments out there don't do that at all. They're more programmatic. What events can we host on campus? Things like that. But what was abundantly clear was that our responsibility as students that we have is incredible. It's unique that we get to assess not only the student services fee, but we get to oversee all of these college fees and things, but then also the simplicity of the fee system and structure at K-State. And I know it's gotten to be that way much more so in the last couple of years. We are incredibly lucky with how that works out. And we're not just a single, like our entire budget isn't just one line item from the student life office. And it's just it's very, very simplistic and relatively easy to understand once you kind of get into it, because it's certainly not that way. There's even some region institutions that are like almost flipped and they'll pay like $1,000 worth of fees a semester. And it's crazy how those different balances are and what they look like. And I think we have a very transparent process that we're not trying to sneak hidden fees past you or anything. So definitely even more appreciative of that after seeing some comparative institutions at the Big 12 conference and in the region schools.
Well, student voice is very important. Here, it has a tradition of it here at K-State. It's very important for the administration as well. So that we want to hear what you guys think and get your perspectives and opinions on things. So,
Yeah, we're very unique in our shared governance. Very few other of the Big 12 schools have voting students that are voting members on faculty senate and a faculty senate member that comes to their student government meetings or anything of that nature. Very few of them meet regularly with their chancellors or presidents or provosts. We're eating breakfast with President Linton once a month. We're weekly in with Dr. Lane, this meeting with you, Ethan, and the provost whenever we can catch him. The provost is supposed to be here, but he has had some scheduling hiccups on Tuesdays that have prevented him from joining us yet.
And even on the K board level in the legislature too, just with the, I guess the push recently for student, not only involvement, but leading a lot of those presentations. Yes, yep.
I don't remember.
There was a keynote speaker at the conference. He was a regent.
He chaired the board of regents from like
He's like the vice
2012 to
president at
15.
the KU Medical Center.
He was a regent. He was appointed in 2011. He's a VP at KU Med.
And he was a state legislator for 15 years before that,
Boy, I don't know.
but he chaired from 2012 to 15, the regents, but.
Huh.
It was interesting.
Now I'm looking, but yeah, it was interesting to hear from him, and he said even how much they enjoyed getting to skip their board meeting and like come tour a campus.
Yeah,
But yeah, for those of you that don't know, we will have the regents. Am I allowed to say that?
yeah, I mean, it'll be
It's on
public.
their public schedule.
It'll be public some point.
The regents will be on campus next month for their November meeting, so we'll get the chance to see them and hear from them a little bit.
The official meeting still follows the same schedule, but then we're hosting, K-State's hosting them for the next day and a half after that. And I know they have a specific time slot set aside for the student center. Yeah,
Cool. So
great
there's that.
opportunity.
But yeah, so back to TFSC things, unless anyone has any further tuition or fees or strategies related questions, we can stand adjourned. Unless does anyone have anything? Marcus, go
I have
ahead.
a question. So was there an agenda sent out for today's?
There was an agenda. All it was the questions with Dean O'Keefe, tacked on deliberations. We'll cancel next week's meeting.
Cool. So then the meeting after next week's meeting, what are we gonna?
That will be the first day of the HHS presentation.
Okay.
That'll be like the actual presentation.
Before you adjourn,
Yeah.
is there any questions that you had today that you think HHS, it might be beneficial to give them a heads up so that they're prepared to answer?
Oh, yeah. Was there
Just to
anything?
kind of or allow them to have it involved in their presentation.
The only thing I would recommend, and like I know that we got this information from the slideshow my freshman year, but just including right off the bat that original intent when starting the fee, I guess.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd just be useful for reference for the committee since that's the ultimate decision factor.
I can follow up with Dean Harms on that and see if he can find some information
I'm
for
sure.
us about that. But yeah.
So I guess my question is
Yeah.
for the group is like, what are they told to prepare for us? Does
So
anyone-
I can share, I can find it, the original email I sent to Dean O'Keefe.
And I think I suggested I remember last year, College of Business, this body last year really appreciated that version of their fee review. And I think I
I
think you
shared,
share that.
I
with them.
shared the engineering PowerPoint with them.
The business. PowerPoint.
Business.
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
So,
Yeah. So there's kind of a standard template that's kind of been developed over time,
Right.
that answers a lot of the same questions. But if there's new stuff that you want them to be prepared to come in with, that'd be good.
Yeah,
Just
I guess it's bouncing off of Blake's point. So whatever that purpose is for that fee, if we can just see the data to back up or support whatever it is. So whether that's in the template presentation or not, I think that would be important for us to have.
so what I asked of Dean O'Keefe, and I sent almost a carbon copy of this email to Dean Harms. The committee will ask you to bring forward a presentation about the status of the fee within your college, including how the fee has been allocated and if its allocation has been consistent with the initial proposal. Included in your presentation should also be information regarding any additional surcharges and program-specific fees, because HHS has all this free professional programs. And then I included the section of the governing documents that say the fee review process must include a report of how the funds have been used in the previous years. Accompanying this report can be an official audit showing where the funds were spent. That's straight out of the bylaws. And then I have attached a presentation from last year that the committee thought was structured well if you need guidance.
And Marcus, also to my office works with the college, each of the college that comes up and presents and make sure they reconcile to our books with what they're presenting. So we partner with everybody there.
What happens if they don't reconcile?
Well, then we have a conversation.
Yeah.
They're everybody's, I
Yeah,
shouldn't.
I'm sure they always
They,
do.
they do,
Yeah.
they do. I shouldn't say that. We all work well.
Yeah.
Please don't take that. That everybody does.
Thank you.
But yeah, unless anyone, we wouldn't want that. Unless anyone else has any other questions, we can go ahead and stand adjourned at 6:03 p.m. Okay, thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, Augie. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Trying to start.
I gotta watch